Hello everyone, and thank you for joining from wherever you are to today's edition of Daf Yomi. Daf is Bava, kamma, Daf 69 Omid B. Let's dive straight in. In the case of one who purchases wine from among the Samaritans, the Kutim, one who purchases wine, etc. If one has 100 log of wine that's completely untied and says, 2 log that I will later separate from this wine shall be teruma, 10 log shall be third tithe, and 9 log shall be second tithe, he must actually separate the teruma and tithe before he may drink the wine. In accordance to the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Sefer Zerayim, Hilchot Masa 7:1. And how does it define Kusim? Kusim is the Samaritans. Kutim is a name given to those people who exiled to Eretz Yisrael by Sennacherib, king of Syria, in order to replace the exile from the kingdom of Israel. They settled in Samaria, Shamron, and they were therefore known as the Samaritans, Shamronim. These immigrants eventually took upon themselves several of the Torah's mitzvot. See Kings 2, chapter 17. Relations between Samaritans and Jews deteriorated at the beginning of the Second Temple period during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. The Samaritans later established a center of worship on Mount Gerizim, claiming that the sanctity of the mountain is established in the book of Deuteronomy. Several generations of sages recognized Samaritans as Jewish, going as far as to declare them more punctilious in observance of their selected mitzvot than the Jews themselves. Later, as the Samaritans continued to distance themselves from the Jewish people in virtually every regard, they were ultimately accorded the legal status of Gentiles. The community of the Samaritans in modern-day Israel numbers roughly 700 individuals. They reside in 2 locations, Mount Gerizim and Holon, and enjoy cordial relations with both Jews and Arabs. The early commentators discussed why this halacha was taught specifically with regard to wine produced from Samaritans, as opposed to the topic of the tractate Demai, doubtfully tithed produce, which could have been purchased from any individual who is not meticulous about tithing Amaretz. They answer that several notable halachot are conveyed through using the specific example of Samaritans. One halacha is that although the Samaritans were known to be meticulous about tithing their produce, they did not refrain from selling untithed produce to others, and therefore one who purchased produce from a Samaritan would have to take care of this matter himself. Another point is when purchasing produce from an Amaretz, there is no requirement to separate teruma, as it is assumed that even those who are not meticulous about tithe, or at least separate teruma. The assumption is not necessarily true of Samaritans, as the Mishnah indicates. Furthermore, as wine purchased from Samaritans is considered produce that is definitely not tithe, the declaration described here would have to take place before twilight Friday afternoon, whereas doubtfully tithed produce can be tithed during twilight, says Rashba. And commentators note that this Mishnah was taught before the sages declared that the Samaritans should be regarded as Gentiles with regard to all halachic matters. After that decision was taken, it became prohibited to drink the wine altogether, just as it is prohibited to drink the wine of a Gentile, and that's from the Meiri. If there is a reason to suspect that teruma and tithe were not separated, and he cannot separate them before the start of Shabbat, Lifnei Shabbos, it's prohibited by being able to separate tithe and Shabbos, as this has the appearance of preparing an item that is unfit to be eaten before Shabbat. Furthermore, the separation of tithe is similar to consecration, which is prohibited on Shabbat because it resembles commerce. He acts as follows. If there are 100 log of wine in the barrels, he says, 2 log that I will separate in the future are teruma, as the mandated average measure of teruma is 1/50th, 10 log are third tithe, and the 10th of the remaining 9 log are second tithe. Asar Maser Rishon, Tisha Maser Sheni. 10 are third tithe and 9 are second tithe. Although both tithes are a tenth of the produce, the second tithe is only 9% of the total, and after removing 10 log for the first time, there's only 90 log left. In reality, the second time is slightly less than 9% of the first, is slightly less than 10%, since after separation of teruma, only 98% remains, and after the third time is removed, there is 88.2% left. The Mishnah does not speak in terms of these precise calculations, and he desacralizes. Meichel. This translation, which is in accordance with Rashi's interpretation, assumes a derivation from the root ches lamed lamed, meaning secular. He explains that the desacralizing should be performed before Shabbat, as any steps that can be taken to permit the consumption of wine should be performed in advance. Many early commentaries disagree with this interpretation, maintaining that redemption of second tithe cannot be undertaken until the second tithe has already been specifically designated. They therefore explain that the term means to dilute a drink from the root mem hey lamed, Rabbeinu Tam Rav Hagon. The Rambam gives a third explanation for the word to start from the root tav chet lamed, so this phrase in the Mishnah means that one may begin to drink immediately. The second tithe that will separate in the future by transferring the tithe onto money, and he may drink the wine immediately, relying on the separation that he will perform later. This is a statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon prohibit one from doing so. The objection of these three sages is presumably that this arrangement relies on the principle of retroactive designation, as at the time of the declaration of the identity of the particular portions of wine will be teruma, and tithe is unknown, and these sages do not accept this principle. It is apparent from this mission that Rabbi Yehuda does not accept retroactive designation, and therefore he cannot be the one who said that the owner of the field may issue his declaration of relinquishment in the morning. The Gemara says, ultimately, why do you reverse the bright that contains the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Dosa? It is because there is a difficulty due to the contradiction between one statement of Rabbi Yehuda and another statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Now too, although you have reversed the brighter, a similar problem remains, as there is a difficulty due to contradiction between one statement of Rabbi Yochanan and another statement of Rabbi Yochanan. As you said, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, do not say that anything that was picked from this vine by passers-by shall be desacralized onto these coins. Rather say that anything that will be picked from this vine shall be desacralized onto these coins. Apparently, Rabbi Yochanan here accepts the principle of retroactive designation, but it is established that Rabbi Yochanan does not accept the principle of retroactive designation. As Rav Ashi says, that Rabbi Yochanan says, brothers who divided property received as an inheritance, brothers who divided between them the property they inherited from their father are considered purchasers, and they must return the property to each other in the Jubilee year. Nevertheless, the original division of property is not void at that time. Rambam Sefer Zeraim Hilchot Shemitah V'Yovel 11:20. Received as an inheritance are considered purchases. Since there is no retroactive clarification, according to Rabbi Yochanan, all the possessions of the deceased are considered the joint property of the heirs, and the division of portions among the heirs is categorized as sale. For this reason, the portions must be returned to ownership in the Jubilee year. The Rambam writes that after the portions have been returned to joint ownership, each heir takes back the portion he had taken originally. A totally new division of the property is not undertaken. The Rambam Sefer Zeraim Hilchot Shemitah V'Yovel 11:20. Others disagree with this ruling. From each other, and as the purchasers of land, they must return the portion to each other in the Jubilee year. Yovel. The Jubilee year occurred once every 50 years up to the end of the First Temple era. In the Jubilee year, all movable property that was purchased during those 50 years returns to its original owner. In the case of brothers who divided their father's estate, according to the opinion that they are deemed purchasers from one another, they must redistribute the estate in the Jubilee year, at which point they may redistribute the property. This demonstrates that Rabbi Yochanan does not hold that it is retroactively clarified that each brother's portion was designated for him directly upon their father's death, but rather all of the land was considered joint property until the brothers traded or bought their respective portions from each other at the time of the distribution of the estate. In light of this objection, the Gemara retracts its previous assertion that Rabbi Yochanan formulated the declaration of the pious ones, while the pious ones actually declared in the past tense, anything that was picked from this vine by passersby shall be desacralized onto these coins, i.e. desacralization took place after the grapes were stolen. If so, the question remains, why did Rabbi Yochanan not accept the opinion of the pious ones, but instead rule that the owner of an item cannot consecrate it after it has been stolen? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yochanan found a different attributed Mishnah, which contradicts the opinion of the pious ones. As we learned in the Mishnah here in 62b, one who steals an item after a thief has already stolen it, i.e. one who steals a stolen item does not pay the double payment to the thief or to the prior owner. Why not? Granted that he does not pay to to the first thief, as the verse states, and it was stolen from the house of the man. If the thief shall be found, he shall pay double. Exodus 22:6, which indicates that the double payment applies in the case of an item stolen from the house of the man, i.e. from the owner's jurisdiction, but not an item stolen from the thief's house. But let him pay the double payment to the owner, as it presumably still belonged to the owner when the second thief stole it. Rather, one must not conclude from this that a stolen item is not under the full jurisdiction of either the owner or the thief. It is not under the jurisdiction of this one, the first thief, because it does not belong to him, and not in the jurisdiction of that one, the owner, because it is not in his possession. Therefore, neither of them can consecrate the stolen item. The Gemara asks, granted that this unattributed Mishnah disagreed with the Mishnah that cites the pious ones, what did you see that led you to follow the unattributed Mishnah, the one that discusses the double payment? That Rabbi Yochanan act a rule in accordance with this unattributed Mishnah, which states the practice of the pious ones. On what basis did he choose one Mishnah over the other? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yochanan followed the Mishnah that discusses double payment because there is a verse that supports it. And when a man shall sanctify his house to be holy to the Lord, in Leviticus 27:14, from which it is derived, just as one's house is in his possession, so too anything that one consecrates must be in his possession, excluding items that have been stolen from him. Abai said, if Rabbi Yochanan has not said that the pious ones and Rabbi Dosa said the same thing, i.e. the rulings are identical, I would say that the pious ones accept the opinion of Rabbi Dosa. According to the reason suggested by Abai, it is only due to the ordinance instituted by the sages that the owners may redeem or relinquish their produce after it has been taken by thieves. Without this special allowance, it would have not been possible for them to do so. Consequently, this does not contradict Rabbi Yochanan's ruling that an owner may not ordinarily consecrate an item after it's been stolen. When Rabbi Yochanan himself associated Rabbi Dosa's opinion with that of the pious ones, he indicated that both opinions are based not on rabbinic ordinance, but on general halachic principles. If so, this contradicts his ruling that an owner is not considered to have jurisdiction over an item that after it is stolen from him. It is not clear if Abai as well as Rav intended to disagree with Rabbi Yochanan or merely to raise a theoretical alternative possibility. This ambiguity apparently underlies the dispute between the Rambam and the Ramban as to whether the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of the pious ones or with that of Rabbi Yochanan from the Chazon Ish. Rabbi Dosa does not accept the opinion of the pious ones. Abai elaborates, the pious ones accept the opinion of Rabbi Dosa for the following reason: and if the sages institute an ordinance for the sake of a thief to prevent him from eating unredeemed fourth-year grapes by allowing the owner to desacralize produce as no longer in his possession, it doesn't need to be said that they did so for the sake of innocent poor people, as Rabbi Dosa claimed. Conversely, Rabbi Dosa does not accept the opinion of the pious ones, as he says it is for the sake of poor people that the sages instituted an ordinance, but the sages did not institute an ordinance for the sake of a theft. In line of the aforementioned principle, feed it to the wicked man and let him die. In a similar vein, Rava said, if Rabbi Yochanan had not said that the pious ones and Rabbi Dosa said the same thing, I would say that there is a fundamental difference between the cases of fourth-year produce and gleaning taken by the poor, as one could claim, who is the Tana who taught the ruling of the pious ones? It's Rabbi Meir. Doesn't Rabbi Meir say that the second tithe is property belonging to the Most High? Second tithe produce is considered the property of God in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Say if it's right, Hilchot Maaseh Sheni, Benito Avai 3:17, rather than the possession of the one who separated from his produce, and even so, with regard to the redemption of the second tithe, the merciful one establishes it in his possession, as is written concerning the second tithe. And if a man will redeem any of his tithe, he shall add to it his fifth part, Leviticus 27:31. Although according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, the second tithe did not belong to the owner of the produce from which it was separated, nevertheless, with regard to redemption, the merciful one does distinguish between a stranger and the one who separated it from his produce, as the Torah refers to the second tithe as his tithe, and thereby decrees that he, the owner of the crop from which it is separated, can redeem it by adding 1/5. Commentators know that even without mentioning the extra fifth, the Gemara could have proven that the original owner is considered the owner of the second tithe from the fact that he alone can redeem the second tithe produce, while others cannot do so without his permission. Tosfot explained that the halacha that he alone can redeem the produce is merely due to the fact that it is in his jurisdiction, whereas the additional 1/5 is a sign that the produce had fully belonged to him. but no one else can do so. This indicates that although second-tithe produce is not in fact owned by the person, the Torah treats him as the owner of the produce. With regard to its fourth year vineyard as well, the sage derived many of his halachot from a verbal analogy between second tithe and the fourth year fruit, based on the use of the word holy in the context of fourth year fruit and holy in the context of second tithe. It is written here concerning fourth year fruit trees, and in the fourth year all of its fruit shall be holy for giving praise to the Lord. Leviticus 19:24, and it is written with regard to second tithe and all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, it is the Lord's, it is holy. Leviticus 27:30. From this analogy it is derived, just in the case of the term holy, that is written in connection to second tithe, even though it is property belonging to the Most High. With regard to redemption, the merciful one establishes it in the jurisdiction of the one who separated it. So it is in the context of the word holy that is written in connection to the fourth year vineyard, even though it is not his property, as it belongs to the Most High. With regard to desacralizing, the merciful one establishes it in the vineyard, in the vineyard owner's jurisdiction. The effect of this determination is that even when the fruit is in his jurisdiction, it is not his property, and yet he is able to desacralize it. And due to the reason the owner of the vineyard is able to desacralize the fruit, even after a thief has taken it, even in normal circumstances, when one desacralizes his fourth year fruit, he is desacralizing fruit that does not belong to him. Consequently, there is no novelty in this ruling that one can desacralize fruit even after it's been taken by a thief. But with regard to gleanings of the poor, since the act sheaves that the poor inadvertently take are the property of the owner of the field, it may be claimed that only when those sheaves are in his possession, i.e. they have not been taken by anyone else, can he relinquish his ownership of them, whereas when they are no longer in his possession, he cannot relinquish his ownership of them. Consequently, the pious ones who permitted redemption of fourth year produce after it had been stolen would not necessarily agree with Rabbi Dosa, who allowed the relinquishment of stolen sheaves. In a similar way, Ravina said, if Rabbi Yochanan had not said that the pious ones and Rabbi Dosa said the same thing, I would say, who is the Tana who taught the opinion of the pious ones? It is Rabbi Dosa. I would have said so that an unattributed Mishnah should not present a difficulty opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. And the reason why this would have resolved the difficulty is that Rabbi Yochanan does not say to apply his principle that the halacha is always according to the unattributed Mishnah in a case where the Mishnah expresses the opinion of an individual sage. Thank you for listening and all the best. Bye.